The first one, this is probably the #1 pet peeve of every designer I've ever managed, is saying like, I'm trying to design something and the PM just, just let me sketch this out real quick. And it's what your designer is hearing is, I don't actually trust you to problem solve, but you're good at making things pretty. So I'll do all the hard work and then I'll give you this napkin and then you can put it into Photoshop and do whatever it is you do. From the PM perspective, what we're thinking is, oh, this is really hard. I don't even have the words to explain the problem I'm trying to solve, but I saw something like this on another website, and so I'm gonna sketch out something like this other thing I saw, and that will bridge the gap between what's in my head and what I actually want. The thought bubbles over both heads are going, and everyone is kind of just annoyed at the other side. And so this is one of those things where, like, if you are a designer and you're hearing this, a good way to respond is, if you haven't been through this before, say, okay, go ahead and sketch it out. And then let's talk about why this is what you were thinking. I see that you put something in a big area over here. Why is it in that place of prominence? How important an action is that? What do you want users to do here? This looks an awful lot like what Facebook is doing. What about what Facebook is doing seems like it's going to work for our project as well? I really want to understand so we can build a solution. I have had many design reviews that I would go into and I would see it derail down this path. And what happens in a particularly kind of contentious workspace is you'll hear someone say, like, oh, shouldn't that be aligned this way? And the designer's like, yeah, I'm not worried about that right now. And the PM who is trying to cause trouble will be like, well, don't you care about quality? And then everyone just shuts up, and then you have a totally unproductive session in which nothing actually happens. And there is usually not someone who is willing to be like, shut up, that's a stupid critique, and let's have a better one. I do this a lot. But since most of you are probably nicer than me, a thing to do instead is, if you start down that path, to say, you know what, we have not checked this for polish. There are absolutely going to be typos and misaligned things, and here's what I would like you to focus on instead. As a PM, if you find yourself looking desperately around for things to talk about, how can I best help you? What are you most stuck on? Maybe you could walk me through how this works. Anything that's kind of have the conversation of like, how can I best help you? Because all of these, every interaction you're having where you're thinking about problems and design should be, we're both smart groups of people here. How can we give the most important piece of information? How can I give you the most useful feedback, by the way, is a really, really good sentence for almost everything. And actually, if I find myself in a situation where I just don't know how to respond, that's usually what I will say, and it buys me time to think about it. Bad one-on-one. How can I give you useful feedback? Someone presented something that doesn't look anything like what I asked for. What's the best way I can give you feedback on this? Someone gives me advice, like, Cindy, you did this thing and it was really awful. Thank you. What's the best thing I can do from here? Because anything that you respond like, shooting from the hip is probably going to make matters worse. And this is just, it's the equivalent of, I'm sorry, let me think, and it works really well. So another one, I don't have as funny a quote for this one, but there's kind of a standard of like, this isn't good enough yet. I want to keep working on this. And I see this with both design and engineering all the time, because if you are a person who builds things, whether you're building as lines of code or Photoshop, you always want it to be better. Like, every design team I've ever managed or worked with has wanted to redesign. Every engineering team I've ever worked with has wanted to refactor. It's the way of it, and the reality is the business case is usually not on their side, in part because the code can be actually incredibly messy and still be really productive. The design can be incredibly inconsistent on those weird detail pages, and it doesn't actually matter to the customer. But what you want to kind of get at here is where is this coming from, and what is the level of change that we want? Like Dan talked about thinking about the ROI. I think about this like, what will this change? Are we asking for more time because we want it to be 10% better or 20% better, or because there's some fundamental flaw that maybe is hard to articulate, but you just feel like this is not going to work? And a lot of times, if there is a flaw that is kind of complicated, it's hard for someone to articulate, like, I just don't feel that this design is working, and I want to give it a few more shots. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. One of the things I found when I first started hiring full-time copywriters for product copywriters is that bringing that in early solved a ton of interaction flow problems, where what would happen before is PMs would kind of say, here's a whole interaction, and then the interaction would require this immense amount of copy to get jammed in at the last minute, which if you need more than one line of microcopy, then your interaction is just wrong. I'm going to stand by that as a good overarching rule. It's like, if you need to explain it, then there's something that is, you've got too many things on a page, it's in the wrong order, you haven't, done progressive enough disclosure, whatever the thing is. And so when I hear this isn't good enough, what I want to know is it not good enough for you with special designer glasses on who see every imperfection, which I know, I empathize, and also we can't? Or is it, there's something wrong here that we haven't solved? Like, I feel like people are going to make this mistake. I feel like this is so much copy, I'm having a hard time putting it on the page, which usually means you should go back to the drawing board to some degree. And sometimes it's like, okay, let's not make this an us versus, and you versus me. It's like, let's put it in front of some people. Can we put some paper prototypes in front of people? Can we literally go to new hires or someone that works in a different part of the building and show them things and see how they react? But this tends to come down to, the default is, I need more time, and we don't have more time, and it's not getting into like, why are you asking for this? Generally, how do we get beyond things like this? Because this is where, we're just in the early stages where we're in that problem space, and we want to get the best possible solutions forward. And a lot of times that requires a certain amount of healthy conflict. If everyone is just kind of nodding and smiling and being pleasant to each other, you're going to have mediocre products. That's just the way it is. You need that certain amount of like, why are we doing this? I don't think that's a good idea. Here's a risk. And the biggest thing I have found for helping that happen is actually just creating a shared language, or I like to say like a code word for something. So you can encourage people to collaborate all day long. You can put a section in your spec template for collaboration. But what really helps people is the ability to say a phrase that, in lean manufacturing, they talk about like pulling the and in. Is anyone familiar with that phrase? Yeah, a couple people. So in original lean manufacturing in Japan, when they were making the cars better than us, there's a whole notion that on the factory floor, there was a literal cord. And if you saw something that was messing up the factory line, you were just supposed to go over and pull the cord, and that would stop everything. And that would allow you to say, oh, the work is backing up here, which means that these people are going too fast, which means they're making more mistakes, which means these people over here are having to redo. And if you can fix the problem at its root, then you should do it. And of course, no one wants to stop everyone around them. So the default is to kind of look at it and kind of like, I guess it's okay. And that is what leads us to be fixing bugs in production, a month from now at great cost. Repeating back the feedback, which feels very almost condescending, but I promise it's okay. You say, okay, I hear your feedback. What I'm hearing is X and Y and Z. And this is where you're not defending yourself. You are not making excuses. You're just saying, I hear that you've been frustrated. I hear that you did a lot of work, and then I came in at the last minute with extra information that you didn't have. I hear that you're still not happy with where the direction is. And that feels really, really awful to say, especially when it's your fault. And I find the more managerial I get, the more often it's my fault. And thank you. And then let me think about this and get back to you. And I find especially when I was a designer, people would always want me to like mock up things on the fly. And I have never been a person who does my best work in that case. And it's just like, I like that idea. Let me think about it. Let me get back to you. And the get back to you might be as little as a half an hour. There have been times when someone has given me feedback and I'm like, I have almost a response for you, but I would really rather like go to a focus room for 10 minutes and like write some notes to myself and then come back. Like, ask for that. Make it okay to give people that. Offer it to people. Like, I have seen people kind of trying to come up with solutions on the spot and jumped in to say, you know what, can we give you 15 minutes? Can we all go get coffee and then come back, and then we would like to hear from you? Because a lot of times people won't ask for it because we like thinking on the spot. It gets rewarded a lot in our culture. And most people I know do not do their best thinking on the spot. So if you can like throw those life preservers to folks, you end up with so much better. Let's all go get coffee and then we'll come back. You know, let's go to lunch and then come back. And I think, you know, Dan didn't mention this, but the first time I saw the double diamond process explained, the person who explained it said, in the middle we go to lunch. You know, we do the first part and then everyone goes to lunch. And then when you come back, you're doing the second, because there's a very clear shift of that.